everybody, it's Drybear. As we approach Season 1 of Mythic Plus and raiding, as well as the Race to World First coming up for Dragonflight and World of Warcraft, we have received a patch notes list of the upcoming class tuning that's coming soon. A few notes on this. We'll go into the details. We'll go through the high level of every class change. Some classes aren't being touched at all. Some categories like roles are being touched, and they looked a little bit on PvP. So let's jump into the details and we'll go through the items as they appear. These are expected to come Tuesday, December 6th, and they will be right into game. And remember, they are very aware of the impact that the Race to World First, which is where all the best raiders in the world of World of Warcraft race to see who can clear the raid on the highest difficulty before anyone else. So they want to make sure that they have to get all the changes in that they can before the Race to World First in Season 1 starts, so that there's not crazy amounts of buffs and nerfs. So they've kind of done some temporary measures that are more like band-aid fixes to try and, you know, stem the bleeding and make sure things are in good shape. And then I'm sure over the next month or two, we'll start seeing more and more changes. So this is expected to come in this Tuesday, which is a week before Season 1 starts. So let's jump into the details. The first one is 100% more threat generated by tank characters. And I think this is super good. I've been playing my Brewmaster in Dungeons and in Mythic Zeros, and I can tell you there's definitely, it's mostly on pull, which they do mention here. So there are times where an Evoker or a Rogue or somebody can just get everything off so fast that it's hard to keep threat on all the mobs, or it forces you to have to use a medium cooldown in order to keep threat on it for every pull. So super cool. You get a little bit more threat overall, which won't matter later in the fight. It's really just for the on pull. And it's roughly, they say, a 15% increase to tank threat generation. Super cool. We like that. Demon Hunter, getting a nerf to the Hunt. This is the Night Fae Covenant ability that existed in Shadowlands. Very unique, super fun, very bursty. In early Shadowlands, this would one-shot people. And it looks like it was still doing a little bit too much. It does have a dot portion to it too, which is super cool, but looks like that's coming down 10%, which is a sizable damage nerf, and maybe this is mostly for PvP, or I don't know, maybe it was overperforming in PvE, I don't know. Next is the Fodder of the Flame, which is the Necrolord ability. This spawns a mob for you. I guess it was scaling with haste. This had a cooldown on it, and that's being removed. So this was just kind of like an oversight. They're getting rid of that. So if you're Demon Hunter, your Fodder of the Flame is not going to be cheesable with your stats, and the Hunt is losing some damage. Next is Druid Restoration. Regrowth healing decreased. Regrowth is their casted kind of emergency heal. It costs a lot of mana. It applies a hot, but you can, especially in tree form, do tons of healing. The fact that they're only targeting regrowth here means that they're probably happy with the amount of hot healing, throughput healing, raid healing that druids are doing. It may be just their single target spot healing or burst healing with regrowth was a little bit too high, or maybe tree form was overperforming. So that one's gonna come down a little bit. For Hunter, steel trap damage has been reduced. Doesn't really matter all that much. I guess it was doing a little too much. I have feeling this is just PvP, but they're hitting both of it. There it is. Explosive shot damage is being increased. Barrage damage is increased. So this is a mutually exclusive choice in the Hunter talent tree. You can choose either explosive shot or barrage. It did seem like they were underperforming, so it's nice to see a 15% increase in damage for both of those. Marksman's Chip, all damage increased by 10%. Survival, all damage increased by 5%. We saw this in the pre-patch. The parses for the pre-patch, and pre-patch is kind of nonsense anyway because it's level 60 characters. They don't have all their talents yet, that sort of thing. But it is nice to see some damage increase for these gamers. They're able to get a little bit more damage on that. Marksman definitely needed some love, and then Survival needed a little bit of love too. Although I'm wondering how this is going to scale with gear. Heavy ammo now causes trick shot ricochets to deal additional 25% damage, which is over the original 10%. So let's get a little bit more damage for marksmanship, plus the 10%, which will scale on that as well. Super nice. I'm glad to see that. Another interesting one, 5 increases for Fire Mage. Again, we saw this in the pre-patch parsing. Fire Mage was underperforming by a good bit, as was Survival and Marksmanship. BM was doing just fine. So I guess either they're using the pre-patch numbers as reference. I'm sure they have statistics for how people are doing now, prior, like, you know, preseason start. But this is, if you're a fire mage, rejoice. Flame strike damage increase 8%, pyre blast 5%, fireball 10%, scorch 10%, ignite 5%. So across the board, most of your core abilities are getting boosted, even one of your bursty abilities. So that's nice. Fire mages are going up. The next one is Assassination Rogue. Kind of insane. Insanguinate, which is a choice cooldown, is going from 45 seconds to 3 minutes. And they mention, and the magnitude of bleed effect is reduced from 100% to 80%. So they are mentioning that it was drastically overperforming. I didn't really get a chance to see, I haven't seen that many Assassination Rogues in general, to be honest, and maybe that's why this flew in under the radar, but I guess it was broken. 45 seconds to 3 minutes is absolutely bonkers, but there it is. And they mention it here. We see this as a temporary measure as we head towards the opening of first season and Race to World First. It's possible that we saw some of the Race to World First guilds testing out Exsanguinate as, you know, abusing that for big boost, which is crazy. But yeah, there you go. Assassination getting a pretty massive chunk reduction to Exsanguinate. It's going to do less, and it's going to be on a far longer cooldown, so keep that in mind. Next is Monk, Brewmaster Balance, going from 30% stamina to 45%. Happy to see this. Brewmasters are incredibly squishy relative to the other tanks that are available. They're very gear dependent as well, so I think adding stamina is probably a good call for right now, because it gives more room for you to play off your Expel Harm, you know, Orbs of the Ox, as well as your stagger reduction, right? So they play off that stagger meter. They get more bubbles on themselves based on how much damage they have, how much damage they're staggering. Stamina seems like a nice little balance there to pick up. Mistweaver, Awakened Feline Spinning Crane Kick now heals 3 additional nearby allies for 60% of the damage. So Fist Weaving getting a 10% increase on the Spinning Crane Kick heal. Vivify now heals the primary target, increased by 20%. Peaceful Mending now increases healing received by Enveloping Mist and Renewing Mist by 15/30, 10/20. So this one, I don't know how much Peaceful Mending was being picked. This might mean it gets picked more. I think because people aren't raiding right now, they don't have as much need for spot healing or tank healing. Maybe there wasn't as much Peaceful Mending being picked up. But it getting buffed is super nice. And then last one is Yu'lon's Whisper, which is, I believe, the one when you activate your Thunder Focus Tea, you breathe. It now heals 5 targets instead of 6. Maybe they're worried about this just being weird for raids. It doesn't affect groups at all, but it was 6 instead of 5, so it would heal 1 extra person. Maybe they're just thinking that we might be fist weaving through raids anyway. But healing increased by 15%, but you're losing 1/6 of the targets. So this one's going to be a little balanced. It's pretty close range anyway, so this might just kind of reduce the stacked healing that you get on Mistweaver for raids, and then this is just kind of like a nice buff overall for it. So I'm seeing a lot of Mistweavers, which has not really been the case ever since Mists, to be honest. So I'm excited to see more Mistweavers in the game. If you're a Mistweaver, comment down below on how your experience has been in at least dungeons for now, but that's super cool. Paladin Protection gets a 5% increase on stamina from Aegis of Light and a 15% armor increase from Aegis of Light. Protection was a little underperforming. Protection is actually quite hard to play in Season 1 and preseason for Dragonflight. If you don't manage your cooldowns right, you can be exceptionally squishy. So again, just like Brewmaster, it's nice to have a little bit more defense to play with there. Not really a whole lot to say about that, but if you're playing a prop paladin, it's going to be a little bit easier to manage your cooldowns because you'll have nicer gaps in between, and this, of course, will scale nicely with gear as well. Shaman Restoration. I was hoping to see more here. I feel like Resto Shaman is on the struggle bus. I will level my Shaman, but they definitely did not win in the lottery that was Dragonflight. All healing spells increased by 5% across the board. So a flat 5% increase. This is definitely going to help in raids. I mean, obviously it's going to help 5% everywhere, but it's nice to see a little bit more throughput coming for Resto Shaman. And then Acid Rain, which was garbage, damage increased by 50%. This one, I don't... there wasn't really any reason to get Acid Rain, but maybe it's worth testing now. I don't know. Where it is in the Resto Shaman tree, it didn't really make any sense to get it. Even just 1 point wasn't worth it, but damage increased by 50%. So maybe they're like, hey, check it out. Give it a try. Let us know what you think. I still probably won't get it, but we'll see. I don't know. 50%'s a lot. Warlock Soul Leech now converts 3% of damage dealt to an absorb shield, down from 6%. I'm not sure why this is here. I don't know if they had data that suggested that Warlocks were a little too tanky. This might actually be more of a PvP style change that they felt wouldn't have been that much of a negative in PvE. But you know, it's here it is. Soul Leech damage absorption cut in half. So I guess it was a little bit too much. Warrior, the big one is protection. I was expecting big nerfs. So here's what you get. Fueled by violence for arms and for protection. Now heals for 85% on arms instead of 65. And for protection, it heals for 85 instead of 65. It was not healing a lot. For protection, it didn't really matter. Protection's in a great spot right now. They're super tanky. They have a lot of cooldowns. They deserve it. In Shadowlands, they got shafted super hard, so it's nice to see them in Dragonflight coming out on top. Brutal Vitality now causes 15% of the damage you deal to add to your active ignore pain instead of 30%. This is probably not the last of the nerfs we're going to see. But this cuts Brutal Vitality in half. You know, it actually made Ignore Pain stay up pretty long, and it gave you a big boost, probably more than it should have for just being this single choice here. So Brutal Vitality is coming down by half, but you will get a little bit more healing from Deep Wounds if you're running Fueled by Violence. Kind of neat. On to PvP. Now, they preface this by saying that they made these changes based on what they have observed on live realms since the launch, and based on the Dragonflight beta that they had, which was kind of like you know, there were some devs there that played and went on that. So I guess it's hard for them to know until the arena season starts and the rated battleground starts to know exactly how things are going to sit. But these are the changes they've made. These will all only affect the PvP side of things, right? So none of this will affect the PvE. So all these changes up here are PvE only. And these are going to be PvP talents, or in PvP combat, certain things will be affected. So Death Knight AMS, Anti-Magic Shell, is reduced by 25%. Will of the Necropolis, damage reduction, reduced by 50%. Anti-Magic Barrier, increased Anti-Magic Shell duration, has been reduced by 50%. So I guess maybe mages, magic users were having a really hard time killing Death Knight. I feel like that's kind of their identity in PvP. That's kind of why you run them and what they excel at in PvE as well, but there you go. Abomination Limb will no longer pull individual enemy players more than once over its duration. This is pretty huge, actually. This was a big part of the PvP for Necrolord Death Knight in Shadowlands, was the idea that you could pull someone repeatedly. It was on a 4-second internal cooldown, but you could continually pull them back to you. Obviously, Death Knights struggle with getting, they wheelchair their way around. Like they struggle to get close to targets, but I guess that's coming down. So not as much damage reduction on Will of Necropolis. AMS is getting a huge nerf in 2 different ways. Improved Death Strike, increased Death Strike's hold healing has been reduced by 50%. So the Death Strike healing from the talent is going to go down a bunch as well. And Death Strike's healing based on percentage of recent damage is reduced by 50% if it was dealt by players or their pets for Frost. And same thing for Unholy. So they say that Death Knight survivability has been substantially higher than we're comfortable with. So we're targeting several aspects. This is a lot of defensive loss overall. Additionally, the multiple grips from Abomination created scenarios of unfun gameplay with minimal counterplay. I mean, yeah, you just kept getting yanked over and over and over, but once it's over, all they have is grip, and then they're just running at you over. There's certain classes can get away from them very easily. We're changing this talent to be able to pull in a unique player once and then never again. We'll believe this change will allow the talent to be an attractive talent to pick while maintaining counterplay options for opponents. I'm curious if this will change whether people run Abomination on DK, specifically in Arena. I feel like you would probably still run it in Battlegrounds. There's so many unique targets anyways. But there you go. Restoration Druid. Budding Leaves is now 70% effective. Fixed an issue. Caused Focus Gross buff to only apply to 1 life loom at a time while using. That's nice. I didn't even know this was happening. But I guess focus growth for your life bloom was only applying to one of your life bloom when you have multiple life blooms. Okay, cool. Life bloom has a higher percentage of Druid's healing breakdown in PvP than we'd like, so reducing budding leaves to be more in line, and they're fixing an issue which would have made life bloom even stronger. But life bloom in PvP getting, I would say it's probably like a slight nerf. You still have a lot of options here, but I guess you combine this with the regrowth change that we have up here. Life bloom and regrowth both taking a hit in PvP means, yeah, that you'll definitely feel that. Keeping a single target alive through burst, you're definitely going to notice that. Evoker. I have not had a chance to play my Evoker in PvP yet at all. So I'm not, I need to do that and figure out exactly how they feel in PvP. Scholar Adaptation's cap is reduced by 30% in PvP combat. This is the one that when you do healing, you can make your, you can stack up Living Flame bonus based on your healing done, which gives you a little bit more damage, which is nice. Fire Breath's initial damage is reduced. So the dot damage is being not unaffected by this change in PvP, but the initial damage is being reduced. If you did a full charge Fire Breath, I imagine it can feel pretty juicy, but there you go. Disintegrate and Pyre deal 15% increased damage. Disintegrate, the reason they're doing this is because it's a channeled ability. You don't really get to channel all that often, especially in Arena. So I guess they're trying to buff up the damage a little bit so that Disintegrate can still be useful even if you cancel it early because someone breaks line of sight or you get interrupted or you get CC'd or whatever. And then Pyre, I feel like you wouldn't really be able to get stacks up to make Pyre do its highest damage as easily either in PvP. And also it is using Essence. So there you go. So I guess, and it's also meant to be AoE and you don't always get to get cleave damage with it. So maybe they're just boosting it up so that these can be more consistently reliable in PvP. They say the goal of this tuning change is to reduce the high burst from fully charged Fire Breath, blah, as well as the potential to kill enemies without any time to react. Living Flame also had potential to deal high burst with the Scarlet adaptation, stacking up bonus damage. And to compensate, increase the damage of Disintegrate and Pyre, so you can contribute more meaningful, consistent damage and less burst. So I guess they were bursting everyone to death. Preservation, mana regeneration is reduced by an additional 10% in PvP, saying that all healers have reduced mana regeneration PvP so that fights end after a reasonable period. Preservation wasn't in line, so they reduced that. Mage, two big changes here for Arcane and for Frost in PvP. And then remember that the PvE changes for Fire Mage will also affect the PvP there. So you got that going for you. So for Arcane, Nether Precision is now 75% effective, so that's being reduced. Prodigious Savant is now 80% effective. Arcane Bombardment is 65% effective in PvP combat. I guess these weren't being reduced at all. They don't say previous values. They just say this is the new value, which makes me believe that none of these were being affected by the PvP scaling. Arcanes had big bursts, but that was kind of their thing. They had far less control than Frost, and they had less proc-based boom boom as Fire, so it was nice to be able to do the burst when you got everything lined up. We're looking to address Arcane's instant burst damage, though adjustments targeting Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage modifiers. Arcane Bombardment in particular has been too powerful of an execute effect in PvP, and so it's now being reduced by 35%. Yes, it must have been a very serious problem. Again, this is based on pre-season, I'm guessing world PvP and general PvP, and then their beta tests. So it must have been pretty seriously overperforming if they made these big of a change to it. Frost, Piercing Cold, 50% effective. Ice Lance damage increased by 20%. Piercing Cold, whatever. Okay, whatever. Ice Lance damage going up. Interesting. Kind of interesting. Maybe they just felt like the Ice Lance, I guess it just wasn't doing enough. Snowdrift no longer has a cast time. I feel like they should have done this so long ago. Oh my god, this should have been so long ago. Frost Mages rejoice. Snowdrift is instant. Oh, and it's reduced from 60 seconds to 45 seconds. I thought this was never coming. So if you're a Frost Mage, comment down below if you like this change. I don't know why it had a cast time for the longest time. It didn't make any sense, but they finally did it. So I guess this must have been mages giving their feedback on what they wanted, and maybe they're willing to tank Arcane a little bit to get this. But Snowdrift is instant. It has 15 second less cooldown. Glacial Spike, critical strikes are hitting harder than we would like, despite the long cast time, which is why Piercing Cold here. We're reducing piercing colt's critical strike damage modifier in PvP to help address this without impacting the base damage. Yeah, okay. We're also increasing the damage of ice lands as the splitting ice talent is less valuable in PvP. True. And additionally, Snowdrift has been requiring more ramp up than intended. Yes, so we're removing its cast time and lowering its cooldown. Cool. I think this is a win for Frost Mages. I think this is super cool. I don't think I mean, it's nice to be able to giant glacial spike one-shot someone, but I feel like this was coming anyway. It's nice to get Ice Lance damage, and it's nice to have instant Snowdrift, so there you go. Monk Mistweaver, Ancient Teacher of the Monastery, which is your, you stack up Tiger Palms to make your blackout kicks hit multiple times. Now heals for 375% of the damage done. Nice big heals coming off of that, so that's nice. It means that if you actually stack up Ancient Teachings, which isn't, you don't really get the chance to Tiger Palm people over and over and over, and it does kind of reward that. It especially with the burst damage, and now you didn't get to use it as much. So this going from 240 to 375% means that you have a little bit more fist weaving options. You can get into melee, deal damage, and get some nice burst healing off of it, which is cool. I'm curious to see if we actually see more melee attacks from Mistweaver. It's always been this back and forth for fist weaving in PvP, just because you don't really want to be out in the open when people can, leaving yourself open to just be slammed on hard and interrupted and CC'd and locked out and stuff like that. So trying to reward this without bringing back the horrible monstrosity of red Mistweaver that just did ridiculous damage, which was like BFA, I think, 2 expansions ago. So this might be a nice little middle ground that gets us in between. Echoing Reprimand for Rogue, damage reduced by 30% in PvP combat. We've seen the ability could have extremely high burst, more than we're comfortable with, so we are partially reverting the change made in last week's hotfixes, where Echoing Reprimand damage was no longer reduced in PvP. I'd have to see how this works. This may be nothing. This may be fine. 30% reduction on Echoing Reprimand is sizable, but it's not kind of like a linchpin. So we'll see how this plays out. Shaman Enhancement, improved Maelstrom Weapon, increased damage and healing of spells, 8%, 15% per stack to 10, 20. A little bit more enhancement healing. We like that. That should be pretty helpful. Again, very similar to, yeah, just melee characters that need to get in close. Enhancement is still very bursty, but the self-healing, I guess, from stacking up Maelstrom Weapon wasn't enough. Raging Maelstrom increased the effectiveness of Maelstrom Weapon stacks by 3% in PvP combat. Storm Strike and Wind Strike damage increased by 30%. Holy God. Damage and healing from fully stacked Maelstrom Weapon are higher than intended, so we're reducing the value of the associated talents. So the damage and healing from Maelstrom Weapon goes up, right? Healing from 8% to 10%, 15% to 20%. Damage and healing up. And then the Raging and Maelstrom increase the effectiveness of Maelstrom Weapon stacks by 3% and PvP was 5%. Okay. So Raging Maelstrom, at base, it's going up, and then the Raging Maelstrom choice scalar is coming down. So that's what they're changing here. And we've liked for enhancement sustained damage to be more well-rounded in PvP. So we're increasing Storm Strike and Wind Strike. Cool. Sounds good. Elemental Magma Chamber effectiveness reduced by 50%. Earth Shock and Elemental Blast from Elemental Shamans deal more damage than intended with high stacks of Magma Chamber. Magma Chamber cut in half for PvP. That kind of sucks, but maybe it was necessary. Warlock Crystal Tongue reduces cast time by 10% PvP. Was 15%. Thank you from all the healers out there and casters. Thank you so much for this. Crystal Tongue is applied through Amplify Curse. Reduces cast time by 20% in PvP, 35%. So a nice reduction in Curse of Tongues. Super cool. I don't play Warlock in PvP. I play a lot of casters. I like this change. I guess not cause casters have a frustrating time. It is painful, especially if they're running Affliction, which they will be in Arena for the most part, and getting a lot of, you know, yeah, it's pain. Warrior Arms, Mortal Strike damage is no longer reduced by 30%, so Warrior damage from Mortal Strike on arms going up. I'm curious to see if there's a lot of Fury in PvP right now, just how they're performing, but Tremor Blades now increases critical strike damage by 5%, down from 10. Martial Prowess now increases Mortal Strikes damage by 15% per stack, down from 30%, cut in half. Execute damage increased by 20% in combat for arms only. Thank God. Rend damage reduced by 50% in PvP combat for arms only. And then we're looking to increase Mortal Strike's consistent damage while keeping its burst potential in line. So arms are getting a little bit burstier, and then they're bringing down some of these that helped make that happen in PvP. And then at base, it's going to be stronger, and then execute is stronger, rend is stronger. So arms, I guess, were underperforming. I hadn't noticed any of this, but I guess they were. These are pretty. It's pretty sizable to get this chunk here, and then you get a little bit more option for running different choices other than sharpened blades and martial prowess, which is cool. So there are the changes. Comment down below if you feel like this is what you wanted, or if you feel like you got changed on something that you didn't want changed. But there you go. Coming up soon, we probably will see another round of these before Season 1 starts. The raids start, the M+ starts. So be on the lookout for that. But that's the changes we're getting for December 6th. Coming soon. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content. Link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.